Welcome to Masculine Journey. We're glad you're with us this week, and we're missing a couple people from the show tonight. We have a few back. We have a few that's gone, and so we do miss Andy and Darren, both having some little things going on. We hope that they'll be back with us soon, and so they are going to be missed. And Danny, you're back. You were here a couple weeks ago, right? And so, but it's been a while since you've been here, so it's good to have you back more consistently.
Good to be back.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway,
Okay.
yeah, you don't remember, you gotta talk to the mic, that's how that works.
I called you last week, so I had the mic on my head, so.
That's true, you did.
Yeah.
That's true, you did. So the topic for this week, I was thinking about this, and I don't know what made me think about the song from Casting Crowns, but who am I? You know, and it asked the question. And I thought, wow, that's just a great topic just to kind of talk about, because who are we really? And so we're going to see where God took it this week, and that's where it came from. And that'll be part of our bump coming back in. Will be from that song. Amazing song. If you haven't heard it, it's way old. It's been here, not like Harold old, but it's old. You know, I guess it's in context. You know, you have to say, but it's probably, I don't know, 20 years old by now. And so it's such a great song. But Jim, you have the first clip of the night.
And it is also a song, Who Am I, which when I saw what we were speaking on tonight, hit me immediately. And it's pretty clear. I mean, I think Harold was a teenager when this one came out.
Wow.
It was 60s. It was a group called Country Joe and the Fish, whose big hit was Feel Like I'm Fixin' to Die Rag. And if you're not 70 or older, you probably are clueless as to what I'm talking about. But this song represented me well when I used the word morose, sad, depressed and depressing teenager who wasn't sure who I was. And from my earliest memories, I always believed in God, but I didn't know where I stood with him. And this is kind of the way I felt when I was a young teen. And the name of this song is also Who Am I?
Good. Here we go.
It sort of amazes me, I felt this way as a young teenager, and this was late 60s. I had one hippie sister and another one was a wannabe hippie sister, but she was too straight. And they had Country Joe and the Fish album, and I listened to a lot of their albums a lot of times. And this really registered with me as we're just all gonna be squashed by lost love and crushed by the wheels of fate. And I don't know why I identified with it then. I've got far more reason to identify with it now, but I don't. And the real issue is coming to a relationship with God. And I'll go ahead and just shoot my whole wad here real quick, but I was looking at our Bible study this morning, and I'm going to pull out the phone and not read it to you, just so I can give you the address, because right now all I can think of is First Colossians, but, excuse me, not Colossians, First Chronicles.
Yeah. Yeah.
And David basically asked God that question. Now, who am I? And I decided, well, that rings familiar. Other biblical folks have asked God who they are. And God never answers the question except pointing them to the relationship they have with him. He tells David that, you are the shepherd who I made king. And David had already started this conversation by praising God. So he was already knew that he was God's, and he later repeats that. He says, you know everything about me. You know who I am. And others ask the same question. Moses, who am I to save the people? And again, God says, doesn't matter who you are, I'm with you. That is a repeated thing, and the only one I found that was a little different, and this wasn't an exhaustive study, but there were 5 examples, and all of them pointed to the relationship with God. But in Job's case, he actually said, this is who I am, not who you are. And it's the end of Job where he describes all of the things he did and where were you when I did all this. So once we get that part straight, the relationship with God, we know we are his beloved children. And until we get that, there's no real reason to be happy with your life.
Well, thank you. You want to add something, Grant?
Yes. This is in my shirt, we didn't plan this, but in 2 Corinthians 5:17, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old is gone. The new is here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've cleared my voice.
Yeah. Yeah, a new creation in Christ, that's part of our identity, correct? Jim, I couldn't figure out why I knew that song. I'm like, when you hadn't played it, had the clip cut, I was like, I know this song. And then as you were talking, I remember my brothers playing it. They were 9 and 10 years older than me. So that would have been in my brother's
Same
sophomore,
range.
junior time, and I remember that song playing at our house.
One of the few times I ever heard my father angry enough to yell was at my sister when they played Country Joe and the Fish, and it had some words in there we're not going to repeat on
We
the
could
air.
not use them there, yeah.
And it really shocked me because that was actually a song I liked a lot too. It was against the Vietnam War. I think that was part of the, doom that I felt oppressed by in my youth.
Now, Harold, yours would have been what, like the War of 1812, or?
Revolutionary.
No, Revolutionary War.
Spanish
Now,
Inquisition.
well, we were all struggling to try to figure out what Jim was saying. Like, it's not totally unheard of, but when you use big words, because we're not a big word kind of group that much, but Jim uses the roast, right? And we're trying to struggle to find what it is, and Harold had the perfect answer for that. Harold, what did you tell us that meant? What was a good example of that?
Eeyore.
Yeah, Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. That's a perfect example of what Jim was telling us. And so it just locked in for me that this is exactly what that meant. So it made it come alive. So thank you, Harold. That was really good.
And Robbie jumped on a 3-letter word there, which, with his love of Hebrew, 3-letter words are the most common. But he said, sad. And yeah, I was sad, and at a very early age, I was drinking to try to drown that sadness. But as life continued, I started figuring out a few things, and God had me all the time, but I didn't feel like it for a significant part of my life.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I don't think we're very surprised when you hear of a teenager asking that question, because they're trying to think, okay, where am I going with my future? What school am I going to go to? Am I going to go to school? All those kinds of things. But it's a question that comes up pretty frequently, I think, for people at different points in their life. right? You know, when you first become a father, okay, it changes who you are, right? It fundamentally changes a lot about you. Whenever you become a grandparent, it changes you in a different way, right? And so there's plenty of opportunity to say, okay, who am I now? You know, yes, I have this other part of me that's been coming along, but now it's changing and going in a different direction.
And you think about, you know, Jerry Maguire, the famous scene where he says, "Am I just another shark in a suit?"
Right.
And often we're disrupted,
Mhm.
right? And we have to look at, oh my gosh, who have I become? Another shark in a suit kind of thing. And, you know, that's another wake-up call to who you are. May not be very attractive to you when you get a good smell of that cesspool.
That's a pleasant thought before we go.
Let's take a break, run to the kitchen, get something to eat.
Yeah, yeah, wow, okay. Yeah, anyway, I don't even know what to say.
It's actually a C.S. Lewis quote. He
Oh.
said, you know, many of us would get a lot better grip on reality if we got a better smell of our inner cesspool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because we who we think we are, it was the case of Jerry Maguire,
Right.
he thought he was a big-time agent, you know, making all
Mhm.
kinds of money, but when the little boy showed him what his values actually were, then clearly he'd been disrupted, and
Mhm.
he got a smell of his inner cesspool.
Absolutely. Well, thoughts to ponder. That's a good one. Anyway, when we come back, Harold's got a poem for us. I'm looking forward to hearing Harold's poem that he wrote a few years ago, you know, in our lifetime. But
Just a drop in the bucket for some of them.
for some of us, it was later in life, and others it was early. But yeah, no, looking forward to hearing his poem again. But I want you to ask yourself, who are you right now? Not what the roles you play. Yes, you know, I'm a parent, I'm a daughter, I'm a son, whoever that is, right? Whatever you are. But who are you in God's eyes? When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But that's a question that really matters the most, because when you get that one correct, all the others seem to line up under it. So I want you to think about that as we go away. We will talk with you when we get back, and we would talk to you then. Okay, got nothing else. I started to say boot camp. There's no boot camp.
I didn't realize that is the worst
That
chair.
was
That,
three
I got
other
rid, I don't
questions.
sit in that chair
Yeah.
anymore because it squeaks so bad.
Yeah.
But you can lift, there's a thing right underneath
Oh.
it if you want to lift it up. You found it. You
Yeah.
have to stand up where you hit it.
Yeah, I started to.
There you go.
Every time I start to say something about boot camp, I'm used to saying that, and I'm like, I got nothing else to say, and I get 8 seconds.
We're squeaking.
Good polish.
Well, 1, 2, 3, what are we fighting for? Don't ask me.
So Danny, we'll come back with Harold's poem, and then we'll have you talk.
Okay.
Because I always cut Harold short, so I don't want to do that.
Unintended?
They do. Welcome back to Masculine Journey, and that kind of sums up what we're talking about today, who we are. We're going to talk more about that, but as I did that well-polished exit, going into break, I was trying to think about what we were to talk about next going into this session. And I'm really looking forward to, Harold, your poem, if you would share that with the people that's listening. We heard it a little bit before the show, but if you'd share that again.
Okay, this is one that I wrote back on December 26, 2012. I was obviously in a very introspective mood at the time, but this is a very important question to me at the end and even now. And having it as our topic tonight, I think will emphasize to our listeners the value of trying to discover, who we really are. So here's the poem. Do I really know who I am? Is the mirror image really me? Or is my persona only a sham? What do others look and see? My aim is much higher than my reach, my failures so much easier to find. If I could truly grasp what scriptures teach, what a difference would come to my mind. I love the Lord and need forgiveness. My pride and selfishness so often in the way. How can He continue to bless and bless when my steps stray so far day by day? That's how I know about His great love. His desire to save me is why I'm still here. When my earth time is over, I'll be above, because I can trust Him without fear.
Good.
Amen.
That's really good, Harold. Thank you so much for sharing that. I was thinking about boot camp, you know, and one of the things we talk about, as we're talking about, you know, being authentic. And one of the questions that they say, you know, go ask the people in your life really who they see you. Who are you, right? How do they see you? This can be a really scary question. And when I think back at different times, as you wrote there, Harold, you know, I see myself as one type of parent. You know, was angry a lot. You know, I remember the things I didn't do well. But when you talk to my kids, they don't remember it that way. And it's weird how God, you know, protects them sometimes from some of that, but also how the enemy comes up and points to your failures over and over again to try to hold you down and keep you away from what God's trying to tell you is the truest thing about you, which is you are His. And so, thanks, Harold. That was awesome. Danny, you have the next clip.
Yeah, mine is not from Billy Bob Rake and Pitchforks, but whatever that is.
The Turtles.
Yeah, the Turtles or whatever, from the Andy Griffith Show. And it's an episode where Andy confronts this guy, this publisher, and summons him back to Mayberry for a speeding ticket for $15. And this guy's big time. And it rubs him the wrong way, of course. So he goes after him with this reporter who Barney just spills the beans on all kinds of things. Barney elaborates on all this stuff. They make this a news article, and it comes out, and the state attorney investigates Andy. So he's on. It's a hearing that you're going to hear, and there's been as they go into the hearing, you know, well, we've got a star witness, you know, that'll bring you some things to light. And Barney's sitting over there going, I can't wait to see who this witness is. Well, it's Barney. And they put him on the stand. And, you know, they go through a series of questions and everything, but, you know, Barney is very upset that now he knows that he's the cause of where he has a big role in what's going on. But, you know, what we're going to hear is Barney's explaining and confessing some stuff. And, you know, he's going to use a couple words that, you know, talk about Andy being his friend and being a townsman. And that's kind of why I chose to clip, and I'll explain it afterwards. But you play it.
So is it Andor? Or is that the name?
Andor, yeah.
Barney. Okay, here we go.
Barney, you know, he explains it well, and, he says he bragging a little bit and, got himself into trouble but, he talks about the friendship between him and Andy and Andy in the town and it reminded me of when you said the topic out, Sam, who am I? I was reminded there's another song that, called Friend of God, and our pastor did a sermon on it one time, being a friend of God. And he used this scripture in Exodus in 33:11. Says, so the Lord spoke to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend. And, he talked about Moses being a friend of God. Well, a few years before that, God had spoke to me and said, that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I've got that on a, placard somewhere that somebody made for me. But what I didn't realize up until this point in my life is that I struggled with who I was most of my life. And it was simply because I was asking that question to the wrong people or to the wrong places. Because, we talk a lot at boot camp about taking your questions to God first. And, I know I do, I get in a lot of trouble when I don't take my questions to God first. Nothing wrong with asking folks around me, who am I? But I need some clarification from the one who knows who I am. And, when he did that and they played that song, I had been going to AA meetings, I'm Danny and I'm an alcoholic. But after that, I would start saying, I'm Danny and I'm a friend of God. Because I realized that I can say I'm anybody's friend on this planet. I can tell you I'm Donald Trump's friend or, whoever. That doesn't really mean anything, I'm just telling you that is. But now when they turn around and they say, Danny's my friend, now that means something. I remember going into a former employee's establishment. I'd worked for him for several years. And I walked in there and he's standing there talking to another guy. And he stops and I walk in and he introduces me. And this man could have introduced me in several different ways. This is a former employee of mine. He used to work for me. But what he said to that man was, this is my friend Danny Marsh. And it meant the world to me. Because that man had every right to never even talk to me again. Because I quit during the heart of some of my addictions and that kind of thing. But him saying that I was his friend. And to think that the CEO of the universe, the one who created everything about me and everything about you and everything else, looks down and says, Danny, you're my friend, is incredible to me. And, and since that time, there's been layers and layers and layers of that. And the last thing I'll share is that, it's because of God's sacrifice in Christ Jesus that he can call me friend. That I'm able to, I know I'm more than his friend, I'm his son, I'm his beloved. I have favor with him. That's who I am. And there are days I don't feel like it. There are days I don't feel much like anything. But the reality of it is that because God says so, that's all that matters.
Absolutely.
Sam, in the first part of the show, you asked after the break, during the break, for people to look at and think about what other people would say about it. And I didn't just do it for me, and I have actually asked people, and usually I just feel like they're being nice, be kind to me, but my self-evaluation is invariably lower than my evaluation I get from others. And I think that's probably true of everybody in this room, because people can see when God is in you, even when you're not feeling very godly, as you pointed out. And I've never heard anybody say anything about Danny that wasn't extremely positive. But are you ready to accept that from humans as well as from God?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Well, I was thinking about, my grandpa, for me, growing up, he was the most godliest man I knew. My dad's dad, and I didn't know him well, but he was also really probably one of the most humble man I ever met, and I couldn't figure out why for the longest reason, but as you grow as a Christian, you realize how far you really are away from being godlike. Yes, you're becoming more and more, but you realize how great that distance is, and how God just sweeps in and loves on you regardless of where you are along the way. Because as you said, Danny, you are the beloved child of the King, right? And so remember that this week as you head out, and ask God some questions. Who am I to you, God? How do you see me? And if you start to hear some condemnation, that's not from God. You may hear conviction, there's a big difference, but when they attack you, attack your character, that's from the enemy. Block that voice and just keep with it. Say, God, who really am I in your eyes? And let him answer it. We will talk with you next week. Enjoy your week and love somebody well.
Oh, it's quiet, I know it's good. Take off mine.
I get back here and I see that was gonna be said.
Who had the clip from the office? Oh, Andy did.
Andy did.
Drew, yeah, okay.
No, mine, I'm Drew.
Yeah. And Robbie, you want Young Washington?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the other one doesn't play all that well when it just.
It's a great video.
Art, you got anything?
That's a shame, I was rooting for Lightning McQueen.
Yeah.
You were rooting for.
I was rooting for Lightning McQueen, but
You did what?
I understand why you're not gonna,
Yeah.
because it is more visual than you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, I. Tried to edit it as much as I could to try to get the sense of it, but you really can't get a sense of the fact that, and I suppose I set it up poorly if you set it up just exactly right and talked about the fact that, here's this guy looks like Richard Petty's car, and he's the king, and he's, you gotta feel all that's going on in that scene and really understand it. See the whole movie would help. Because clearly Doc lived it, right? Realize that all those guys' identity, and the whole movie, when you think about cars, has to do with Doc's identity was being in that fast race car,
Mhm.
and then his identity became the victim, right? I was a victim of NASCAR, but actually Lightning in his own way. I mean, Lightning got to be mentored, but it brought out the best in Doc in an amazing way. Right? Well written.
Mhm.
I wonder if
I can relate to that.
I wonder if they took, and I think they did, Lightning McQueen was kind of a shadow of, because in Richard Petty's last race, Jeff Gordon had just come on the scene. And he raced with Richard Petty for Richard Petty's last race. And I wondered if they used some of that kind of model in that story. Pretty sure they did. Because, Jeff Gordon was he was kind of like a Lightning McQueen. He come on the scene and,
Did he let Richard win?
I don't think he won either, but, but it was just, because he's talked about, because he's since retired, racing with, the King, Richard Petty was awesome, so. But yeah, that was his last race.
Yeah, which had to be awesome for you, growing up, you lived so close to his hometown.
I actually met him at Carraway Speedway. I don't know what happened to it, I had a postcard that he signed with his famous autograph. And that was back when he was driving the Dodges early on, with the Challenger and everything, the Super B. But I had all of his models, I put models together, I had the Super B, I had the all of them.
Yeah, I think I probably told you guys, but my wife's parents went to school with Richard.
No, they
Petty.
probably did. When you
Yeah, they
think about it,
did.
They lived right
Yeah.
there, they're
Yeah.
all right there in Randleman.
Yeah. Yeah, so they knew the family, knew him, That's when I first learned about, the camp that he had there for kids, outside of Randleman. I think his son runs now.
Yeah, Kyle, that was his Kyle's son Adam was, they kinda started that thing,
Okay.
and then Adam got killed.
Hmm.
That was the same year, I think Dale Earnhardt got killed, kind of a similar wreck. But Adam was the Kyle, someone was a driver, but, I mean, he didn't really do anything like Richard did. But no, Adam was he was the great hope of Petty Enterprises, because, I mean, he was a talented young man. But, and he looked like, God, he looked just like Richard, maybe young. You look up pictures of Adam Petty, he looked like Richard when he was young, he looked just like him.
Art, you need a haircut here pretty soon too.
Grant, can
Thank
look
you
up.
for reminding
Putting the
me.
protein.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, just saying.
yeah.
You could get the Grant special.
Yeah. Just go and say, just do what you want with it.
Yeah, just do what you want with it.
Yeah. Whenever they ask me how I want the back of my cut, I'm like, I don't care, I don't ever see it.
Yeah.
I just round it.
From what I
straight,
hear,
I
that's
don't
the only
care.
place I have any brown hair left, is where I
Yeah.
can't see it.
Yeah.
For his, but
For the most part, I can't see my hair, period, front or back.
I haven't seen mine in a long time.
I see it.
actually,
When it falls
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
a few weeks ago, I bought this mop for a mirror, so I could actually go like this. See what's on top, because I can't see it. Still a mirror, didn't use it yet.
I think it's time for me to get the little tattoo I said I would get someday. Lawnmower dude going around the balls. I saw it on it was on the camera that they have in church, and I was sitting in a different seat, and it was hitting the back of my head and glaring all over the
Oh,
place.
yeah.
I said, oh my gosh.
Well, I thought you
Where
saw
did all that hair go?
the tattoo on somebody.
Yeah.
My friend Bob, has the skin cap with the fur trim, like for that. But yeah, I was just saying, you're the biggest Colts fan I know, you got a horseshoe on your head. He said shaved it, but yeah.
I did kind of really big, Jim, I wore, I had my flat top, much younger, and then I got to noticing that it become a convertible pretty quick.
Yeah.
And so I walked in the bathroom, me and Michelle probably had been married a couple of years, and I went in the bathroom and I thought, cause I was cutting it,
Yeah.
and I thought, you know what? You ain't but that far from just shaving this. I just took razor and shaved everything off. And Cody was young, he loved wrestling at the time, and because of Stone Cold Steve Austin big. I come out and Cody goes, Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Steve Austin, that's actually a wrestling name I remember. That's maybe one of 3 or 4.
Well, Robbie, we'll do your clip first, I think.
Only makes sense.
It does. It does.
Fine.
It might be second, cause I might use a Jason Gray real quick on something.
Feel free.
Or I might do it later, I don't know yet.
You don't have to.
No,
Fear not, do whatever you want.
that's
I'm
fine.
in no,
We'll see where it goes.
It's probably totally silly of me to even say it now, but I didn't wanna be first, I wanted to be first after the
Break?
break.
Okay.
You gotta be out of the way, that's always a good option.
That's right, that's what your email did say, first after the break. Yeah. I got some of it right.
It was a break from last week to this week's show.
Yeah.
You're fine.
That's true. I didn't specify which break, so it's a good point.
Let me go back on in about a minute. Everybody seems kinda tired tonight. No?
I'm a little better
I
than
am, I don't
I
know
was
even know why,
exhausted
but
yesterday.
I suppose, to some extent, I've been fasting a whole lot.
Oh, good.
Humidity.
It's been humid, yeah.
At least it's not 90s.
That's true. I thought, well, it's gonna be 79 today, it's gonna be great. I was just as sweaty today at 79 as I was.
Yeah, humidity.
Yeah, the humidity was way up.
It's a squeaker.
This would be a good time to get you a different chair, huh?
That's fine.
And with hearing aids, it squeaks. You have to hear it with hearing aids to really appreciate the squeak.
I really don't, because squeaks are not my friend. I almost want to be at the point where I need hearing aids so I can turn down my hearing.
One of the main
Not
reasons I
really.
got them was to ensure you don't get Alzheimer's. There was people that have Alzheimer's.
Welcome to Masculine Journey After Hours. We are continuing our conversation of who am I? All right, that come from the Casting Crowns song is where we got that from, and apparently Country Joe and the Fish, is that who that was, Jim?
That's absolutely right.
Okay, and
They did it first.
They probably did, not as well, but they did it first. Yeah, that's true, and so that question was, who am I? Right? Who am I to those around me? Who am I, more importantly, to God? And so what I wanted to play first is we use a song at boot camp a lot, mainly because I like it a lot, but no, I think other people do too. But it's Jason Gray, and he's asking God to remind him who he is. And so the reason that's important is the world labels us, right? Danny, you talked about the label of addict, right? Or maybe you have divorced, or maybe you have whatever, right? Whatever that is, you have labels the world puts on you, and sometimes that can start to feel like your identity. And so the world's really good, and the enemy's even better at trying to make your identity as far from God as it can be. And so I love this song from the standpoint, and it's a great visual song. I recommend you go watch it on YouTube because it's very visual, but everybody's holding up these signs of what they've been told who they are. Neglected, abused, those kinds of things. And so this is what the chorus of it is. Yeah, and it's just a good reminder because the world will come at you. You know, maybe one day you come to work and all of a sudden you don't have a job, and all of a sudden you label yourself as unemployed, right? Or maybe unemployable, whatever that may look like. And so we're constantly taking on these identities that are different than what God gives us. We all have some in common, right? We're all children of God, and Danny, you talked about being a friend of God, right? But there's ones that are unique to us as well that God has with just us. And we've talked about it on other shows, but a lot of times, if you have more than one child, or maybe if you only have one child, you have nicknames for them, right? And all my kids had nicknames. Some of them they didn't enjoy as much as others, but no, they all had nicknames, and they stick with them the whole time, because it's a term of endearment. And God has names that He knows His children by, and so I think it's a big part of our identity. That's another show we do on learning some new names, but. Anyway, I just wanted to touch base on that because you're going to need to ask that question many, many times in your life, and you're going to need God to remind you many, many times.
I love what Danny said earlier, that we tell people all the time, take your question to God. And that's what Jason Gray is asking, remind me, because he knows, like so many in the Psalms, how many times you see Psalms where David takes off in an absolute wrong direction, and you know he is, but it's like, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm experiencing, God straighten me out. And that's the beauty of taking your questions to God. That is what David was doing in the Psalms, is saying, I feel horrible, I know this isn't true, but here's how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And then God begins to straighten that out, and I think that's wonderful wisdom.
But there's another song that's creeping into boot camps, I think I'm responsible for. It's one we heard up in Ohio when we went there. And, you know, part of the phrase from Jonathan Hiltner, I'm your beloved, But one of the phrases that always strikes me in that song, no matter how many times I hear it, he says, the one who knows me best is the one who loves me most.
Mhm.
And that just rings through my heart every time I hear it, because I'm a hot mess. Nobody has to amen that here.
No, we weren't gonna contradict that.
But even though I know I'm a mess, I know that I know that I know that God looks at me and goes, man, I love you.
Mhm.
That is awesome.
It is. You know, I think that, Robbie, when you talk about David, you know, why do we try to hide things from God? You know, that's what really, you know, we can be in the worst mood ever, and then we sit down to pray, and, you know, and we throw on our prayer, you know, mask, or whatever you want to call it, right? God knows, you know, and at least David was authentic. I think that's part of the reason God calls him a man after his own heart, because he was just himself with his father. Yeah, Robbie, you have the next clip.
Yeah, so I hope some people have gone out and seen the new movie that's out, Young George Washington. You can get it on Prime now. If you haven't seen it, it's amazing. Anyway, it's a young George Washington, which was phenomenally ambitious. Like, you're going to hear this in this clip, how ambitious he was. And, you know, how God met him there, interestingly. And I think that it just set it up by saying that at this point in time, George Washington has lost his father. He got some help from a half brother that helped raise him somewhat, but he's out to prove something, and it's not hard to hear it as he begins to discuss what he thinks should happen. And historically, this is the setup for the French and Indian War, like what starts the French and Indian War. Let's go ahead and play it.
We cut off there.
Cut off. Yeah. So he goes on to tell him, you know, that he's totally offended by it because he's asking for the equal pay for the royal officers, right? Like, what are you thinking? And the, I guess, brashness of the way he handled the whole situation is really remarkable. However, God met him in all that and gave him, you know, this unbelievable command, which he, unfortunately, and what happened was it started the French and Indian War. He ended up leading his men into this horrible place called Fort Necessity, where they're essentially wiped out. Many of his friends, including his best friend, gets killed laying in his arms, and which would crush anybody, right? He'd lost his father as a young man. Now he's gotten this command as major and completely destroys his men. And fascinatingly, God uses all that, right, with George's ambition and all those things to begin to define who George Washington ends up being. And as Harold pointed out very eloquently in the pre-meeting, that, you know, when it came to being king, all of a sudden that ambition, you know, got waned through wisdom, right? That what God did with George Washington. And so this week I interviewed a rabbi in a podcast I do called Robbie and the Rabbi. And we were talking about Adam and Eve in the garden. And from the Jewish perspective, they had two different ways to go because they were really not capable of sinning like we are capable of sinning. Like they wouldn't have thoughts about evil because they had no idea what evil was, right? And so here they were in this position in the garden, not really, we really can't relate to how they thought at that point in time, and this is the way the Jewish rabbis have discussed it over the years, is that they had option A, which was, what can I do to glorify God to the maximum extent? What can I do to glorify God to the maximum extent? Or what could be done to glorify God to the maximum extent? And when you listen to those two options, it may become obvious to you what's missing in option number 2 is I. And if you think about the result of what happened when you all of a sudden you put I, see, they couldn't necessarily sin the way we could, but they could put I into the equation. And if you put I into the equation, all of a sudden all sorts of things become quite different, and which is exactly what George Washington did not do at the moment that literally changed history. That he did not become king because he took I out of the equation. And I'm quite sure that Harold or Jim would agree with me, as they're both my elders, that the older you get, the more opportunities you get to see where you can take I out of the equation and watch God still make it absolutely gorgeous. Because he's doing that for all his friends. And it's an amazing understanding. I really haven't unpacked it all completely, but I do see it in this particular idea of who am I? Well, the older you get, the more in Christ, I guess, you become, more introspective of those kind of opportunities. And you know what I'm talking about, Jim? I see you're grinning like, yeah, go for it.
Well, and when you mentioned our ages, I'm still grinning because we still have lessons to learn. Wasn't that long ago, somebody very special to me wanted to go to celebrate recovery. And the I in that for me was, well, I abused alcohol, but I was never addicted to it. I don't have an addiction, but I'll go to support this person that I love. And got there, and they separated us in small groups, and the small group I was in, everybody was going around the circle talking about their addiction, and I was sitting there, well, God, I don't really have an addiction. And this is how I often tell the difference, and Sam agrees. More often than not, when God responds, it's with a question, not a answer to my question. So I said, what am I going to talk about? And he said, you don't have an addiction? And I said, well, what is it, Lord? And this is when I got a statement, and it was one word. It was control. And another reaction, but it's definitely God, blows me out of the water, and I immediately recognize that's true. And that might be the worst addiction there is. I want control of everything around me. I want God to have control, but let me sit in that chair. If you've seen that video, I'm going to give everything, all the control to you, Lord, and move over out of the chair that is the control chair of my life. So that's a late lesson, but one that really hit home, and is my addiction, and I'm working on getting rid of that, like some have in other addictions in this group.
It's okay, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think a few of us battle with control, so we can relate to that, obviously. The next clip is mine, and it's from a bit that, a talk that John Lynch does to the Navigators, which is a group out in Colorado, and it becomes very famous in Christian circles as the two roads. John talks about two different roads you can take, and one road leads you to a room that above the door says pleasing God. Or one path says pleasing God, the other path says trusting God. You know, and which do you pick? And so he's talking about the whole thing, and I won't go into all of it. And nothing sounds wrong with wanting to please God, but Robbie, it gets to your point. It's all about the I. What am I doing to please God? Right? And it's a very well done talk, but this is a snippet from it where he talks about God has already changed us. Right? We don't have to worry about changing. He's already changed us. We just need to learn how to become who we already are. And so we'll go ahead and play it. As I listen through that, and you think about some of the things we talk about, when John's saying, could I dare believe? When you really think about it, what he's going at is all the things the enemy throws at him. Right? As, you know, you can't be this way because remember what you did back here. Right? Or this is who you really are when no one else is looking. All these kinds of things that the enemy uses to tear you down. But there's things that he's saying, if I can believe in this, which God tells me is true, I am a new creation in him, Grant, as you read in the scripture earlier today, then I'm just having to learn how to be that new creation. Right? I just need to walk in it, and we're not going to do it perfectly. And I love this whole thing from John Lynch, and I'd recommend going to watch it. It's on YouTube. It's not the best audio quality that's there, but it's an amazing, amazing talk. Funny, to the point. You learn a lot about grace. You learn a lot about identity, those kinds of things. But for me, it was very important to realize that, and Darren talks a lot about this if he was here, that on my worst day, I still have Christ in me. Right? On my worst day, I still have hope inside me. Right? And I already have his love and his righteousness. I just need to learn how to live in it and live through it. And so I really, really enjoy that. But it helps me hold on to who God's told me I am. Right? Because at the end of the day, that's what we try to get eroded from.
Yeah, and I would point out that a lot of times what you're hearing, it comes from the enemy, but it may well come from your brother. It may well come from your child. It may well come from your
spouse.
parents. You know? Yeah, oh yeah. Ask Job.
Exactly.
It's just, you know, but our battle's against not flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces in high places. So, but understand that where you heard it may have come from a person that's actually probably quite close to you. Because interestingly, the way that Jesus was portrayed, to point out that the best thing that can possibly happen to you, according to the way Jesus put it in order, is persecution. Because when he says in Mark 10:30 that you will not fail to receive if you're rejected for the gospel, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, lands, and persecutions. And so when you start to hear those things from people that are close to you, it's a really good opportunity to go back to take your question to God, listen to what he is saying, and identify the fact that, oh my goodness, these people that are saying this to me, that they need some love. They need somebody to help them see the truth. Not just the fact that you're not that, whatever it is that they're trying to point you out to, but the fact that they need the truth in their life, because anything that's not the truth, it breaks peace.
Jim, did you want to say something?
Well, something silly, but that's me. I think we need to adopt John's new word into the vocabulary, complurfic.
Yeah,
I mean, is it complete and perfect, or completely perfect?
Yeah.
That's shalom.
But we are clothed in the righteousness of Christ, and that is how God sees us. And accepting that, well, it's tough, because, I know myself,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
not me. But no, we really don't know ourselves, and won't until we're home.
I think about what John Eldridge talks about in Wild at Heart, but it's when you ask your question to other people, you give them the report card on you, right? But no one has an accurate report card on you, including yourself, because most often you're the worst ones to go through, right? Because you know your every thought, you know your actions that you've done, you know all these things that other people don't know, but God knows it. Danny, as you said, he knows me better than anyone else, and he still sees me as righteous. Right, but when you take that report card to anyone other than the Father, it's going to come up short. That's the only place you can take it.
It reminded me of the DISC personality profile. And one thing I really loved about that was it had 3 different views of who you are, and it rated you. It's how you see yourself, how others see you, and then the real you. Now, to take that out of their context, only one person knows the real us, and that's God. And the more we can go to him to find out who we are, the closer we'll be to who we are supposed to be and will be eventually.
The interesting part of the butterfly is I did a study on it like several years ago, is the caterpillar and the butterfly. Not only does the look of the caterpillar changes, his diet changes, everything changes about that in the transformation. And if you assist the butterfly in coming out of the cocoon, you'll thwart its growth. But it's just fascinating that all of a sudden now, you've got a creature that crawled, and now it can fly. Now everything has changed, and that's us, and that's what God is saying. Fly, butterfly. So.
Yeah. Which brings on the meaning of the butterfly circus we often talk about.
Yeah. This is quite a circus.
It is. Grant, did you want to say something?
I think it's one or the other, Lord, the devil.
Yeah. Well, there's a saying that says, you're being fathered by somebody, right? You can't sit on the fence. So who are you letting father you? The enemy or God? And it gets back to that. You're exactly right, Grant. Any other thoughts before we close on this topic of who I am? Anything comes to mind for you guys? As you look around, I see heads shaking, which you can't hear on the air except for a couple of you.
I wanted to ask Sam, who are you?
I am a child of the Lord. Now, I am an imperfect person that is made perfect through Christ. And I have to continue to remind myself of that because I fail every single day. And I love to say I always look back at the victories, but more often than not I look back at the failures and try not to repeat them. And there is some truth in that, and you want to learn from them. but you don't want to be drugged down by them either. And so I walk that fine line sometimes of not being drugged down unless I take my question to him.
There you go.
There you go.
And that question was to you, so that you didn't ask us that question.
Well, yeah, I was gonna ask you that. Let's ask you that.
You mean minute or day?
I mean, like 2 seconds from now, like when I messed up on the last show going into break. You know, there's plenty of opportunities throughout the day to list failures, but there's, the thing that I just love is my morning time is sitting down for just a few minutes. I don't have the hours that my buddy Robbie does and things, but those few minutes in the morning when I do, the only thing I do in front of God in that, and I probably need to break it, is I have a drink of coffee. You know, because I need to get the taste of coffee. But, and then my first priority, I don't care what's going on, is I'm gonna go spend time with him. And that's most often, exactly everything I need to get through the day. It's just holding on to it the rest of the day is the hard part.
And he may be giving you the coffee so you enjoy your time with him more.
Yeah, I make a beeline
He
to the coffee.
created
maker.
it.
Yeah, he did. He knew how it would taste, the way I like it anyway. So a question for you guys, what will you take from here today that you're gonna look differently at this week? For me, I'm gonna continue to ask myself, when I get in those situations, when I feel uneasy, I get in those situations when I feel less than, when I get into those situations of fear and worry, is whose report card am I looking at? Right, and continue to remind myself of that, because at the end of the day, that's important, but it doesn't matter.
When the word introspection was used by someone else earlier, and I was wondering if I was gonna be asked the definition of it. When I'm introspective, it usually goes negative pretty quickly. And I think that's the change I need to make, is when I'm looking at myself, use God's vision of me instead of my failures.
But it takes constant conversation.
Amen.
You know, you can't just ask him once and then expect to hold on to it forever. It's something that you need to just walk very, very intimately with him in. And so we ask that you do that this week, that you spend some time asking the Father, the creator of everything, the one that loves you the most, that knows you the best, what he thinks of you. And get your head around that concept of, I'm already righteous because Jesus paid that for me. I have that in me. Go to masculinejourney.org to see anything we have coming up, and we'll talk with you next week.
Good show?